Everybody's doing well. We're going to do a special weekend edition of the online dinner party. And of course, we have different guests that come in and all in that space. And of course, I'm definitely looking forward to this conversation because a lot of folks are definitely paying attention to technology and what's going on in the technology lanes and all in that space. So I have an amazing guest that'll share some of his insights and all in that kind of way, but definitely looking forward to it. Hope everybody's doing well. I know here in Durham, North Carolina, we are having some torrential rain. It started late last night. It's been running pretty much all day long. As a matter of fact, I just had a guest have their book finally delivered to me and all in that space. So the mailman was not happy since he was knocking on the door, having to make that delivery in this lovely rain. And I've heard that it's going to be going all the way through Sunday. So I know we've got some more rain coming today, some more rain coming tomorrow, and it definitely sounds like it'll be ending on Sunday. And it's definitely made the temperature drop because we were having more summer like weather than spring like weather. And when I stepped outside earlier, it was definitely feeling a little bit on the nippy side. I'd actually earlier today called my mom, who is over there in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, and asked her if she was building those arcs yet, because it is definitely a lot of rain. And, you know, a lot of times when you get that rain, folks start thinking about, is it time to go build an ark? Like, no, it did. And all in that space. So definitely had that little bit of humor with her. And I know a lot of folks are also getting ready to celebrate Easter weekend and all in that space. Today is Good Friday. And of course, Easter Sunday is coming up as well. So I know a lot of folks will be probably heading off to their church services as well as some of their Easter family dinners and all in that space. So it'll be very interesting to see what folks have got going on in that way. If you're sitting here and listening and you've got some ideas about things going on in your life, we always love having those conversations as well. But like I said, I'm going to bring in Wylie Blanchard and see where he is at and how his life is going and all in that space. I do know that Wylie is very much involved in the technology space and is definitely involved in a lot of things in that kind of things that are going on, because a lot of people are paying attention to live streaming networks, digital currencies, and a number of other things that are in the digital world. So, Wylie, glad you were able to join me on this special edition and all in that kind of way of things going here on Pod TV. And by the way, Pod TV is a live streaming network for those of you that, like yourself, that might not be familiar with it. Nick Palveda and Kim Calhoun, who come from two different backgrounds. Nick is a pension attorney by trade, and Kim is an engineer by trade. But they had wanted to have some conversations around different things, including interviewing entrepreneurs, stuff around fiscal literacy, and a number of other things. And they had gone to the more traditional networks, and they had some relationships with PBS and some other traditional networks and corporations, including IBM and all in that kind of space. But, you know, a lot of times when you go in those spaces, they stick you into the graveyard shift. So they were like, hey, instead of doing that, why don't we form our own? And during the pandemic, that's when this network was kind of created, and it's been going on now for about 3 years or so. So it was definitely in the height of the pandemic that it was formed, with a lot of conversations around medicine, around business, and a number of other things that were interest to them. And now it is a network of various programs, and including some of these special interest or entrepreneur type programs. We also have some in the entertainment space, some in the they show some movies as well, and some that are in the self-help space and a number of other spaces also. So that's what you have walked into by coming into the Pod TV family on this particular show and this particular interview. But folks are probably interested in knowing a little bit about your background as well. So, Wylie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I do know that you've been involved for a number of years in this whole digital space, but I know that our audience would love to hear more about you, the person.
Yeah, Mark. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So don't be jealous. I'm in Chicago, and it's very rare, but in Chicago today we have very very nice weather. So don't be jealous. I know that you're getting the rain. Um, yeah, so I've been in technology space for most of my adult life. I was actually encouraged to get into the field by a family member who really encouraged me to learn coding in my early 20s, probably 19. It didn't take at that time because I really wasn't serious about it. Uh, I Toward the latter part of being in college, I realized that my initial dreams, which was to be a professional actor, wasn't really going to take place. So I decided that I really need to focus on having a backup plan. And I reached back out to that same family member and asked for advice. And that started my career in technology. And I found a love for databases in my mid 20s. And I'd say that's really where I really started taking the field serious. And after some time of getting experience in that field, I've jumped into different components of technology, databases, of course, project management, IT service management, security, governance, pretty much the whole gambit of technology. I've dipped my toe into it in some way.
It sounds great. It sounds like you've been doing a lot of great work in that field and all. I won't hold Chicago against you. My brother is actually a diehard Bears fan, and even though I went to school in Wisconsin, being a '84 graduate of Marquette, was actually in school at the same time that Doc Rivers was there, and all in that space. But I have always been, instead of a diehard Green Bay Packers fan, much to the chagrin of some of my friends that went to school with me in Wisconsin. I've been a diehard Vikings fan ever since the Fran Tarkenton days and all in that space. So I'm not a Fairweather fan, and neither is my brother a Fairweather fan as well. So we've kind of stuck with our teams, even though we respectively do not root for the same team. So I'm thinking you're probably a Bears fan as well. So Malik would probably thoroughly enjoy that, since you are probably a Bears fan in that regards.
I was a Bears fan as a kid growing up, big time Bears fan. In high school, wanted to play football, and of course that didn't work out. But recently, I don't watch sports as much as I did when I was younger.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And some people have gotten away from that. I have a friend of mine that does a Black Business Expo on a regular basis, Dr. Eric Kelly. And I know that he used to be a diehard Lakers fan, but he is now not that big of a sports fan. And he's actually trying to encourage more folks to not go necessarily the route of sports or entertainment, which is, you seems like you went into both of those interests or having an interest in that, but trying to get people to go more into tech and other kinds of fields. And we've definitely seen a push for minorities in technology. So I just wondered your thoughts around that. And is that something we need to see more of? And if I can just add another insight, I have some friends that are into augmented reality and virtual reality, and some of them have not even attended college. I know that you have a college background, but I did see that there are some folks that are getting into this lane that are not necessarily going the traditional college route. They might be getting certifications in different parts of technology, but they aren't necessarily going into the 4-year method of doing it. So I just wondering your thoughts about minorities in technology, and do you necessarily need a college degree to work in the field?
So let's address both of them. So I rarely encounter a large number of minorities working in the tech field on the day-to-day side or in the leadership side. Oftentimes throughout my career, I'm the brownest person in the room. So and that's been consistent with every entity that I've worked with. And actually, let me backstep. I started consulting around 2012, 2013, independently, and then launched my own business. My business is called Reactivity Technology Solutions. We are a managed service provider providing consulting services to different businesses. And we have over 30, I want to say 37 clients right now. And often there's no other, brown individuals on the other side of the table or the conference room when we're working with new clients. So it's very rare. It's my opinion that there was a time when those brands, when large and mid-sized brands were actively looking to increase their diversity from a demographic standpoint. But I don't know that is still the case today. I'd say about 5 years ago, for about 10 years prior to that, there's a lot of push, and I only can say that because most of my clients during my early consulting phase always offered me jobs, and they were always trying to get me to come on as a full-time employee. Hopefully that answers that first question. The second question is about the need for degrees versus certifications. Neither one are technically required in the tech space. And that's one of the beauties about it. I've been working with young people for I want to say the last decade. I taught IT courses at a local community college for about 3 years, and one of the best things about it is that it's a great opportunity for young people to get into it without a college degree and without a potential certification. Now, when I'm talking to young people, I do encourage that they choose one or the two. I do believe that if you want to get a good foundation experience of knowledge, then you either should get a traditional degree, potentially in computer science or security, cybersecurity, or something related to IT, or invest in getting some of the entry level certifications like A plus certification. Google has a lot of nice entry level certifications. AWS has a few. I have a preference toward CompTIA's A plus certification, but that's just one avenue. But any of those avenues could be a good entry point. Um, and I can say that you can still break into it even if you're not a young person. I've met individuals in their 40s who have jumped into IT from different fields. I have 3 degrees. All of them are in business,
Mhm.
and I've supplemented my degrees with IT certifications simply because I wanted to deeper dive into each individual subject and bring additional credibility to my skill.
No, that makes sense. How important do you think it is? Because I do have some friends, and particularly one important friend that is in this field, to have end-to-end implementation experts in the technology field. And how much has that been a need that you have seen, and how much is it a difficult field to get into? And what are your thoughts around that?
I'd say that individuals need to focus on a specialty at some point in their career,
Mhm.
whether it's infrastructure in deployment, whether it's service management, um, cybersecurity, governance, any of those fields. You need to build out a specialty and really drill in. And that's going to be the foundation of your career. For me, initially, it was databases. I got a certification in Microsoft SQL Server databases, and I worked on that for about 5 years. After that, I started dipping my toe into other areas, service management, security, and now, now that I'm a little bit more mature in my career, I'm really, the specialty doesn't matter as much, but it's still part of my expertise. I have clients I worked with 10 years ago who still reach out to me for database topics, even though it's not something that I'm definitely into day to day of.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another thing that I've been very fascinated by, and is actually the title of one of your speaking topics and everything, is a lot of times folks are thinking about digital marketing, they're thinking about digital presence and everything. And a lot of times they have a belief that if they build it, they will come, if I can borrow that old expression from the field of dreams and everything. So, what is some of the ways that you try to encourage people to know what they're getting into and to make sure that they are actually having a plan? Because I do think that a lot of times folks don't necessarily have the correct plan in places, and they just think that if they create it, that they're automatically going to get the services that they need and the audience that they need as well. But I don't know that I necessarily believe the field of dreams adage, and I believe that's what's on that movie and all, that if you build it, they're going to come. Sometimes you got to actually do the marketing. So I was just wondering your thoughts about that and how you get people to determine the effectiveness of their digital products.
Yeah, so it's my opinion. If you build it, they probably won't come unless you let them know it's available.
Right.
So you have to consistently let people know, make them aware that your offering is available. You have to call them, you have to follow up with them, and it's my opinion that you have to put a very effective marketing plan in place to ensure that individuals are reaching out to you to learn more about your service and your offering. If from a business standpoint. I am not a marketer. I don't. I don't claim to be an expert at marketing, but learning the hard way in running my business, which initially for about the first 5 years, I ran that business only on referrals from one
Mhm.
client referral to another client referral. But I found out very quickly that I actually needed to market and advertise because that when I lost two large clients back to back, I found a very difficult time of having no major clients for about 3 months. And I then scrambled to put a marketing plan together. Since then, we have what I like to believe a very effective marketing plan. But in my opinion, a good marketing plan has several elements. Some type of digital marketing plan that ensures that you're investing in communicating through digital networks, social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Meta, all the other social platforms. An advertising component, which means that you have a very clear budget to advertise digitally through those same networks, Google Ads, Bing Ads, and that you also have a physical advertising element, whether it's going to be billboards or newspaper ads or flyers that you're going to mail out to individuals, which is what I do. Um, and then a actual process in place for outbound reaching out to prospects, which means someone's picking up a phone to call prospects to let them know about your services, and then asking them to take you up on the services that you're offering them. So those are the key elements that I think should be in every marketing plan. And it's also my opinion that you need to set that plan and then stick with it for a predetermined amount of time, 6 months, a year. In my opinion, the longer you stick with it, the longer you're going to be able to determine whether you're going to actually get the results that you're looking for.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are you ever surprised at how many people don't have business plans that are in the entrepreneurial space? I know that I had the pleasure of talking to a gentleman that is a New York Times columnist, and that was one of the things that he talked about was how there are a lot of folks that don't necessarily have the business plan or the business credentials or a number of other things, even though that is something that most businesses should have. But I was just wondering your take on that, and if that's something that you are oftentimes overly surprised by.
At this point, I'd say no. So I've worked with, I want to say over 300 brands over my career. And the smaller ones often can start without, definitely without a marketing plan, but oftentimes without a IT strategy plan, without a traditional business plan, without a go-to-market strategy. Many businesses will start in that way. I can definitely say that I started definitely without a marketing plan, and then built one over the years simply out of necessity. So it's definitely something that's not, very few. Many companies can start that way. It's my opinion that they really need to, think about how they're going to deploy the different elements of business, whether it's going to be an IT strategy or are they going to use digital technology to optimize their services or simply get the word out, or just have a plan on how much, revenue they're going to put behind their products and services before they determine whether it's a good product or a product they need to, retire. All of us need to do it, and I try to help my clients at least create a IT strategy to build out their business.
How important do you think it is for small businesses to have IT strategy? I think that sometimes that might be something that they don't think about as much as they probably do, because a lot of times they're just trying to think about what they're going to do to survive and what they're going to do to sell whatever their product and or service is. But how important do you think it is to have that IT strategy, and particularly in this day of cybersecurity, to have some sort of IT security strategy?
I'd say it's crucial, and it's often crucial when you're in the process of growth. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is that if you don't have a clear plan or even a strategy that foresees what can happen, it's probably going to cost you more money in the long run. Here's a use case that I recently encountered with a client. Client was reached out because they were audited by a prospect, unforeseen audit, and the audit revealed that they had several security risks simply by doing what I call a surface level audit. And the surface level audit is when someone looks at your domains, and with your public domains, they can see all of the subdomains and domains within your organization, as well as all the ports that are exposed publicly. Within that audit, they can actually determine how many ports are open, but should not be open and are outside of the compliance with standard or regulatory IT strategy guidelines. And if you're not prepared for that, what would happen is that you could lose out on an opportunity to work with a particular client that could be an ideal client for you. And then you're reaching out to someone like me saying, "Hey, Wylie, how can we fix this today?" And I have to say, hey, we need to assess what your entire IT infrastructure looks like before we can really jump in to just say that we can fix them. Some of them we can fix pretty quickly, but all of them, depending on the audit findings and whether there's a regulatory component or not, we may not be able to fix with a quick turnaround. So so that type of scenario happens to, I wouldn't say a lot of clients, but is likely to happen to any business that is scaling and growing.
Yeah, that makes
Because
sense.
if you're scaling and growing, making more money, someone's going to require that you're going to have insurance in place. Then either the client or the insurance agency is going to want to ensure that you have IT processes in place that are meeting standard guidelines, standard regulatory requirements.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I definitely think that more companies need to be paying attention to that. I did see a lot of people that have been having this whole conversation about using the web and definitely using the web to uh, identify and become seen as leaders and all in that space. We've definitely heard a lot of people talking about the notion of an influencer and all in that kind of way. But I was wondering, do you think that enough of the folks that are using the World Wide Web are using it at its maximum capacity, or a lot of people using various tools, whether that's Instagram, Facebook, or a number of the other outlets, maybe even getting some of the accolades and maybe even some of the titles of being influencers, but aren't necessarily using it as effectively as they could be. And what are some of the ways that you would like to see people using this entire wonderful web that we have more effectively?
Yeah, I don't think anyone's using it effectively as or using all the capabilities that the web can offer. It changes too quickly. It brings in new elements too rapidly. You know, ChatGPT is probably the newest thing on the block that's everyone's trying to figure out how to use it. I've been using it for the last 2 months, and I've in the last 2 months I've seen 6 different variations of it crop up on the internet, and I haven't had time to really deeper dive into any of them outside of ChatGPT. I only recently got access to Google's Bard version, which is a variant, and I haven't had time to really deep dive into that. So it can be challenging knowing which tools to use and how involved we want to actually use them. Most of what I've seen is people using what they're familiar with and what they use as a consumer.
Right.
So what I tell my clients is that, hey, if I'm your strategic advisor for IT, please reach out to me. It's my job to know what's new, what's relevant, what's likely to stay around for the next 3 to 5 years, which ones you can invest in, how much money you should be investing in it. That's really my job. I do that every day, every single day. So please reach out to me to just inquire about this new technology before you invest millions of dollars or hundreds of dollars into that item. And then let's work out a strategy for how you can effectively use it. And then let's stick with it, because it's only when you stick with it that you can really see if it's going to, deliver the results that you're looking for. It's my opinion. You should stick with it for at least a year before you decide whether you need to, adjust that strategy. So there's a lot of tools out there. It can be difficult figuring out which ones to use. One avenue that's also smart is hiring someone to manage that new component for you, whether it's a marketing tool or it's an IT tool that's critical to your operations. That's also an effective method, and it can actually remove the headache of needing to want to learn it and then actually interact with it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that as well.
So many companies are using security devices and definitely using the internet and computers to maintain their security and all in that spaces. But of course, there's always those cybersecurity concerns. And I know that is one of the fields that you've also been very much involved in and all in those kind of lanes. So whether it is the day-to-day use of cash points, whether that's using things like Square or a number of other things that are in that space, or even security cameras that are controlled by phones and by the internet and all in that space. How much are you seeing security and cybersecurity being used effectively? And do you have any concerns about this? Because like I said, I know that even at the nonprofit that I work at, that a lot of our security is definitely very much internet driven. So like the people can monitor and even turn off the alarms from afar and all in that space. And I do know that there are some other things that are done in the security space, and there's cameras and other things, and that's a small nonprofit arts organization. And there are others that I've seen that are very large base, but every time we turn around on the news, we're seeing about a breach in security as well, particularly from the cyber standpoint. So I'm just wondering your take on that and whether maybe we're becoming too plugged in.
Well, I don't think there's any way to not be plugged in at all. I mean, I took a year off from social platforms, but now that I'm now back. I'm at a point where I'm ready to get back on, and there's no way to really be connected with others without having some interface with digital technology in some way. From a security standpoint, I'd say that most small businesses don't address the security concern until after there's been an impact, or after a client has made an ask of them, or they've been hit with some type of regulatory requirement by either an insurance or a client. I'm actively working with clients, trying to get them to take security more serious every single day. Some of them are very good at that. Some of them are not. As far as the technologies that's out there, it's who you trust matters a lot. And I can say that, a lot of us, we want to default to one or two things: a larger brand whose name we trust, or whatever's cheapest. Neither one is the best answer. It's my opinion that you should be, really researching all of the IT players that are out there, and the security IT players that are out there. Whether you're looking into someone to look through your emails for spam, or monitor your environment for threats and vulnerabilities, or if you're looking for something as simple as a password manager, you really need to be investigating and interviewing all of the brands that are out there. And maybe you look at the cheapest, the popular brand, and something in the middle, and then make the best choice for where you're at and your risk appetite at that time. What I can say from security is that it's if your brand, it actually doesn't matter if your brand is large. I was going to say that if your brand is large, then the attackers are trying to attack it every single day. But I manage some small clients, and we monitor their infrastructure, and there's attacks on their infrastructure every single day. So attackers are actively trying to attack your brand, your sites through the internet. That's not going to stop. It's very likely that you are going to get impacted by some type of security breach at some point in your career. And it's very likely that your brands that you trust and that you've hired to manage some component of your security, they're going to get breached at some point. There's always going to be a new attack that we're not familiar with. And until we are familiar with that specific attack, we've not yet built a strategy or a process to actually manage how to stop that new attack. So, and there's always going to be a threat factor somewhere. We just have to put processes in place to minimize the likelihood of.
And some of the attacks seem to be more harsher than others, because I do know that there have been all kinds of accusations about foreign powers and some of the attacks that they have made and all of that. But then I have also served on boards where I think the hackers just didn't have anything better to do, so they decided to Zoom bomb a meeting and all of that. Because I do remember being on a theater board, and I'm now not on the board anymore. Served both of my terms, may go back for a third term later on, because I think you have to take a couple of years off before you make that decision and all in that space. But I do remember one of our last meetings that I was at, and this was like almost a year ago, some folks decided to pop in and do that Zoom pop in, and then they switched servers, and they were not to be seen or heard from again. But I just figured they were college kids or college hackers who didn't have anything better to do. So it seems like you have everything from the serious hackers that are trying to get information, whether that's information about an organization or information about a government, to those hackers that are just up for the challenge of hacking. And that's why they do it, because it's almost like a bored hobby, or a less than noble hobby that they just do because they're trying to figure out if they can do it.
Yeah, the funny part is that the Zoom bombing doesn't seem like it's a big security concern, because it's like you said in the news. A lot of that's been shared is about someone jumping into a classroom or
Right.
someone disrupting a live public event or
Right.
something like that. But I've heard of a few of occasions where healthcare organizations are having conversations with clients, and someone Zoom bombs their meeting, or an employee who recently left the organization still has access
Hmm.
to join the call, the video call, and then they're privileged to what could be seen as sensitive or HIPAA protected information, and they shouldn't be. So
Right.
it could sometimes be even more serious than it's actually perceived to be, even when it's something that's as it's seen as in a light way as a video call. But every organization needs to be concerned about it. Every organization needs to be working to be more secure. I'm actually always surprised when there's a breach that really shouldn't take place, because I know that Zoom achieved their growth during the pandemic,
Right.
and they were in the news a lot about being breached, and it was during a process where they were heavily advertising how secure their platform was, and it turned out it wasn't as secure as we initially thought it was based on what they were telling us in their advertisements. Um, the interesting thing is
No,
that they're still one of the top players in
no.
their space, and what we found is that what I've seen anyway is that security breaches are going to happen, and it's going to impact the brands who we believe are secure.
Right.
Um, we should be questioning their security, even if they're telling us it's secure, and even
Right.
if they are very popular. That's my
Because
opinion.
there is another brand that I know is very popular among the gamers, but it is also very popular because there is a lot of, lack of a better term, spam bombing and other kind of things that goes on in that space. And yeah, I'm talking about Twitch, and there are some of the others that are in that game space. We even got hit by that because it is a destination spot that can be used on occasion, even through StreamYard. But there are some that, because of the nature of what they're about, like gaming and other things, seem to be more open to these kind of attacks than others. Is that a misobservation on my part, or is that something that you have noticed as well?
I think they're more likely to get attacked because they're of their popularity,
Right.
and because of their popularity and their known growth, attackers are actively attacking them, versus a business like mine, which doesn't have the name recognition of Twitch. They're just going to get hit a lot more. And because of that, they have to have some very strong security processes in place to protect themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely gotta have that. How much do you think? Because one of the other things I noticed as I was doing research about this interview and everything was that you have, not just the college background, but also a sense of adventure. And I do know that sometimes people think that that is a necessity for entrepreneurs. So I did see that you had done some hang gliding and also done some things that were, like being off tall buildings in Dubai and a couple of other places. So how much is that sense of adventure just a Wylie thing, or how much do you think that it is a necessity to be successful in entrepreneurship?
I'd say it's a little bit of both. So it's definitely a Wiley thing. Speaking of security, my wife says her security process for me, because I like to jump off things, is to increase our insurance policy anytime I'm headed somewhere where I can hang off a building, or go skydiving, or actually I haven't skydived yet. That's the only thing I haven't done. But parasailing or any other activities I engage in. Um, I think most entrepreneurs or leaders, business leaders, need to adopt a process of accepting risk and taking on risk. Now, you don't have to be extreme as me and go skydiving or parasailing or paragliding, but you may want to have some type of process in place where you're taking on new types of risks and different types of risk, so that you can exercise your risk flex muscle. Now, for me, for fun, yeah, I like to jump off things. And actually, the reason I like to do those, what do you call them, sky sports,
Mhm.
um, is because actually I have a fear of heights. So I still like to say I have a fear of heights. I had a big time fear of heights in my younger years. And in my 20s, I actually developed a process where I would conquer that fear by engaging in those extreme sports like bungee jumping, parasailing, paragliding to help me conquer that fear. And I actually adopted that process into other things in my life of trying to get over the things I'm afraid of. So my extreme sport of paragliding is really just me flexing, trying to get over my fear of heights. And actually anytime I actually engage in any of these activities, I still encounter some type of fear of the height. I just have a muscle that I can flex that can help me walk through it and then finish the engagement to its completion, even though I have some level of fear. So it's just my appetite and my level of managing the fear is just better than someone else who has a fear of height and hasn't taken the efforts to actually get over it.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. I know that I've been doing radio. My folks actually started a radio station when I was in a preteen and all in that space because they didn't like what happened with the pod TV folks. They also didn't see enough of the issues being addressed in our community, meaning the minority community, or enough of their music that they love, meaning jazz, blues, and early R&B being played. So without a radio background, they formed a radio station in rural North Carolina and all in that space. So that is part of my legacy. And I've definitely done MCing at various festivals, mostly here in North Carolina, maybe one or two outside of the area, but definitely some outside of the immediate area, because I've also done the Road to the Apollo shows and all in
Oh, wow.
that space. But I can say that one of the things that folks say is, are you ever get nervous? And I'm like, I'm nervous every time I hit the stage. So you're probably nervous when you do speaking engagements, but you lose that butterflies and you get into the flow once you get going and everything. And like they say, if you make a mistake, one of the biggest things is not to call notice to the mistake, because I know I've made several mistakes and will continue making mistakes, but you make it a point not to call notice, and then folks won't pay attention as much to it. So I was wondering, what are some of the life lessons that you've learned in the public speaking space? Because I also know that you do quite a bit of public speaking. So what is some of the life lessons that you have brought on to your own life from public speaking, and what are some of the things that you are still learning about public speaking?
I'd say the most important lesson I learned through public speaking is to always engage in public speaking,
Mhm.
to ensure that you can manage those butterflies or that fear whenever you encounter it. I'm actually not a big fan of being in front of the camera or being the spokesperson in for specific topics, but business requires it. So I've built up an appetite or built up a skill to actually manage it. I'd say another thing to do is you actually just hinted toward it is actually going back and forcing yourself to either audit your own speaking engagements that's recorded or having someone else do it for you.
Right.
Actually it's better to do it yourself, but it's going back to actually count those mistakes, those those ahs, those awkward pauses, those tidbits or bad habits that we may have, and then acknowledge that they exist, and then continuously work toward improving them. And you're actually going to find that over time, you're going to have less ums and ahs. Actually, another key point, I most people don't realize it, but I actually had a speech impediment. I was a big time stutterer when I was a kid. And it was actually through theater and through speaking engagements that I actually learned to better manage my speech impediment. And on occasion, I may catch myself saying a word or phrase multiple times. And if I do that, that's actually my stuttering in place than me just repeating a phrase because I'm trying to drill the point. But I actually learned through a speaking coach and through the process of learning more through public speaking that one good way to actually use that speech impediment is to try to drill it, repeat the phrase, but do it at a point where I'm actually trying to drill something into the audience. And then if I deliberately repeat a phrase that's drilling into the audience, I'm unlikely, at least Wiley's unlikely, to repeat for other phrases that shouldn't be drilled into the audience.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
it's a lifelong journey.
Yeah, definitely a lifelong journey. You've alluded to it a couple of times, but what are some of the lessons that you feel that you learned from your desire to go into theater and your attempts at being in the athletic space that you are now bringing into your entrepreneur and business journey? So I'm sure that there were some things that even in those fields that you learned and all along those lines. And then secondly, I was wondering, do you think that we are teaching enough of the arts and encouraging people enough in the arts, in even in a way to encourage that as a development of critical thinking and a development of business skills?
So the first part of the question, I'd say today, public speaking is more valuable in my career than it was 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
15 years ago, I was working on building expertise, a specialty.
Right.
And that was very critical at that point. Today, I'm not as involved into the day-to-day of my specialty. So my job is really to guide others on implementing and give strategy advice or give essentially strategic advice in some way. So the public speaking is more prevalent today than it was years ago. Um, as far as the arts, I'm 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 on the fence about the value of the arts. I think the arts are so too much from a college university standpoint, where people are going to significant debt for a degree within the arts that doesn't historically have a income, post graduation that can help you pay that debt that you've acquired and then sustain your living, and have financial growth over time. I think that's a big issue. That's a negative side. I do think there's value in exploring the arts for personal growth.
Right.
But I think the downside of that is that the universities have exploited it to their benefit and not the benefit of their students. So I'm 50-50 with that one.
That makes sense, and I can definitely see that standpoint. And all along those lines, on that same line, we have also seen that it seems like everybody and their mother and their grandmother and everybody else in the family has um, tons of devices, whether that is a laptop, whether that is the smartphone, whether that is the smart refrigerator or the smart washing machine, and definitely the smart TV, and all in that space. So I was wondering, do you think that we have become a society that is totally engrossed in the computer culture? And do you think we at some point may even have some more interactive kind of computers? I know that there's even talk of computers that are even attached to your hand or your eyeglasses, and who knows, maybe even eventually be in your eye as well. But I'm just wondering your thoughts about the way that computer growth is going, and is it a something that has been unraveled that we can't roll back in or control, that we're going to be having even more and more computer presence in our lives and in our businesses?
I don't see any slowdown of computers in our livelihood at any time, any place, anytime soon. Um, I think the technology will continue to grow. I think the technology will continue to change. Every time that there's a new technology, there's been talks about stopping it and slowing it down. There's been talks that it's a threat. The video game industry, when I was a kid, the video game industry was in the news significantly as the new threat. But it was a threat to the children, to their minds, to their mindsets. Today, video games are mainstream, and I don't know anyone with a kid who's not used some type of video gaming devices in some way, either on their smartphone or a console device or augmented reality. So I don't think there's any slowdown of the technology. I think that as users, we will always be integrated into the technology. We will be more integrated into technology in time. We're communicating with technology. I have an earpiece on my ear. I have a smartwatch. I have smart devices all around me. My wife tells me that once they deploy a computer chip to put into your brain, that I'm going to be the first one to sign up for it. That's probably true. I probably will. But I don't think there's any slowdown in it, even though there's a lot of talks in the media. There will always be talks in the media about a need to slow it down. it won't slow down. What will slow down is that the politicians will slow it down so that their groups, interest groups, can figure out a way to monetize it for themselves. And then once they figure out a way to monetize them for themselves, the technology will continue to grow. So that's the technology can't be slowed down. Growth won't slow down. It
No,
may
that
take a
makes sense.
pause at times, but it's going to come back and it's going to grow.
No, and I know one of the concerns that people have had, I don't know your thoughts about this, but it's one of the things that I constantly hear in the news media, and definitely folks are more and more concerned about it, is that uh, it's going to get to the point where a lot of the technology will be doing jobs that in the past humans have been doing. And there are some people that are very much pro that. They don't mind a robot surgeon if the robot surgeon is an effective surgeon and all along those lines. And there are others that want that human touch. And we do know that there are businesses out there like restaurants and stuff that are short of staff. And sometimes they're thinking that automation may be the way to go. But I was just wondering your take on the automation of society and whether that's something that is going to be a balance, because we've also seen a lot of, particularly after the pandemic, a lot of jobs that went hybrid, and it doesn't seem like they're ever going to go fully back to the office, even though some of the office companies are trying to get the folks to come back to work in the office. But I think that hybrid is here to stay, and it's probably going to be the wave of the future. But I was wondering your take on that.
Yeah, I'd say as far as automation is concerned and its impact on jobs,
Mhm.
um, automation is going to continue to eliminate repetitive jobs that are repetitive tasks
Right.
or tasks that do not require specialized skill.
Mhm.
Automation has, I've been saying this for well over a decade. Automation is in place to not directly remove those jobs, but because of the nature of business, if something can be automated, then there's no need to have an employee do something that the system can do at a fraction of the cost. And that's not going to slow down. That should be a concern of everyone. And in my opinion, that's going to be is going to um, negatively impact those who have jobs that can be seen as repetitive tasks or low skill tasks before the knowledge level of our population catches up to the new direction, which is going to be that everyone is going to have some higher level skill that's related to technology. That's
Mhm.
going to happen. And it's just a matter of time before that. And I don't know if it's the next 10 or 50 years before we get to that point, but it's my opinion that college level education will probably become elementary level education at some point due to the fact that the things that we learn in an entry level education can be done by a computer.
Yeah.
And most of what we do in college will likely can be done or learn in college that can be repetitive can be done by a computer.
No, I definitely hear you on that and everything. One of the things is that I have a multitude of jobs and have had a multitude of jobs during the course of life and all of that. But one of the jobs that I do work on occasion is a part-time job, which is a grading test paper company. It's one of the leading test companies in the country and everything. And definitely, um, they required a college degree to have the job, and have had the job now as a part-time for a several years, almost a decade or more, and all in that space. But they definitely required a college degree in order to get the job. But as you just pointed out, they are now having us test against the AI. And I think the only reason that some of us humans are still allowed into the job is because AI doesn't always understand, at least not right now, human nuances. So they have to have somebody that can check against the computer, because right now the computers aren't sentient, and they definitely don't always understand the human nuance of a grade school kid and all in that space. But that doesn't mean that that won't happen eventually, because I know that there's even talk about computers now that might be heading toward sentient kind of abilities and all of that. So is that something that you're seeing in your studies and your research as well, that there are more advanced computers coming our way that might be able to think more like a human than they can right now?
I think we already have them. I think they're here. I think ChatGPT and the variations of it are evidence of that. In my testing of those tools, um, even those tools made errors,
Right.
but I was highly impressed with the quality of content that I saw delivered from those AI tools. And it's my opinion that humans make mistakes.
Mhm.
So even for tasks that we do on a daily basis, we make mistakes.
Right.
The computer is less likely to make an error, and the level of errors that it is making today are ideally, if it was done by a human, you'd probably forgive it.
Mhm.
You'd forgive the human for misquoting the author of a
Right.
book, or forgive them for making a grammatical error.
Mhm.
When the computer does it, you're going to forgive it because it's if it does make that error, is likely, at least for what I'm seeing, making errors that a human would make, and often in less amount.
What was your opinion of computers when you were growing up? Because I know when I went to school, there was the age of computers that were pretty much covered up entire buildings. So they definitely covered up entire rooms. We've now got these small laptops and the phones that are basically computers and everything. But just as a child growing up, what was your opinion of computers then versus what it might be now?
I was a big fan. Yeah, I remember I took apart my first word processor, my first computer word processor, and then struggled to put it back together. And that was exciting just to see the little parts inside of it. And funny part is today we interact with computers to a point where we don't there's less need for us to see the internal parts,
Mhm.
because a lot of times we're interacting with a computer that where the actual infrastructure is a million miles away from us. So, but I've always been interested in computers and the capabilities that's there. I find it fascinating that the devices are getting smaller. I remember when we had the large brick cell phones that people walked around with. They were this big, and now I once wore a phone on my wrist.
Mhm.
So I'm always amazed. I was also amazed when the industry moved away from making them smaller to making devices larger. For some reason, the phones were getting smaller. Then someone decided we needed bigger phones. Now we have plus size phones, which I thought was backwards. So it's been an interesting ride. But it keeps very changing and variations that I sometimes don't foresee. Sometimes I do foresee them. It's an amazing space. One of the best benefits of it is that it's yet to get boring,
Mhm.
and it's yet to present something that I wasn't interested in, tackling.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And you're right, the computers have definitely started getting involved in a lot of other things that they were not always involved in those early days. I don't remember a lot of people that were trying to have computers on trains and buses, and I do get around by mass transit, but while they may not be fully implemented, they are definitely some ways that you can definitely have the internet access on your own laptop. And there are even some transportation modes that even have some computers on their outlets and all in that space. I think there might even be some airlines and definitely some cruise ships that are doing that. And definitely we know that many a car has the new cars have computer technology within them and all along those lines. So it does seem like it is becoming not just a part of our houses, but also a part of our transportation, our schooling, and the various other parts of our society. So you don't just have the computer in your house, but it is at the various other locations as well. But there are places that you just mentioned that you were interested in as a kid that don't have fully computer ability yet. I mean, there's some science fiction novels about these things happening, but they haven't happened as of yet. So I'm out here and ask your thoughts around them. But you mentioned your interest as a kid in acting and your interest as a kid in sports. And so far, our athletes, at least as best we can tell, we haven't seen of a robot that is admitted to being a robot and all in that space, competing and all in that space and all along those lines. And we definitely haven't seen robot actors, even though there are um, computer elements to all of the films, but the actual physical actors still have to do some of the physical acting, even though we do have movies like Avatar that have some technology aspects to them and very significant at computer aspects, and even the Black Panther and Women King and a number of other ones, but they still have actual acting individuals. Maybe less of that, less present in Hollywood than in the sports world, but there is definitely still humans in both of those aspects. So do you think that we're ever going to get to the point where we don't need actors and where we're going to have LeBron James that's actually a computer?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. We'll get there. There'll be the computerized generated entertainment, and then there'll be a blend between the two, where real people are interacting with the computerized generated entertainment, and then there's a blend between the entertainment. I challenge whether I really challenge you on the idea of whether robots are playing, playing sports. I think we are. I think we are very close to being cyborgs. And cyborgs is the word I'm looking for. And that would be the next element where popular entertainment includes humans who are integrated with technology. So we already see elements of it where there's sports for people who are amputees and have a prosthesis, and they're engaging in sports. But it's yet to be blended into mainstream media where the primary watched or entertainment point are individuals with some type of device, external device that they weren't born with. I think those specialized sports are foreshadowing what's coming, and then there's going to be a point where there's going to be an entire industry around augmented humans who are designed to entertain us in some way, whether it be sports or video.
So wait a minute, Wylie, if I'm hearing you correctly, because I know that there have been conversations just because of some of the other things that have been going on in politics. So if I'm hearing you correctly, and you can tell me that I'm wrong, but you're thinking that maybe 10, 15, 20 years down the line, we may have the NBA, the WNBA, whatever they want to call the transgender NBA, and the computer NBA. So we may have a computer version of the NBA where the Los Angeles Telenetics are going up against the New York computerites.
It's inevitable. It's inevitable. All the elements are there. We already live day to day with computers attached to our bodies. A few of us who may have medical conditions have devices embedded into our bodies. Pacemakers is a clear evidence of one. It's the next logical step is simple to allow individuals who can operate normally with devices attached or integrated into their body to engage in entertainment. Whether it happens in our lifetime, I have no clue, but I think the elements are already there because you look around, you already see elements of it in place.
No, that makes a lot of sense. What do you think the future of technology and the future of computers are going to be? You've kind of alluded to some of them, but what are some of the more immediate things that you think that folks should be paying attention to and maybe even considering getting into their own personal arsenal of computer technology, whether that's things in the security space or whether that's devices? But what are some of the things that you are observing in your own work that you think folks need to be more aware of?
That isn't mainstream yet. I'd say augmented reality is probably the space that most people really want to keep an eye on. I've been waiting on augmented reality to catch up to mainstream for at least a decade. It's one of the areas that I'm most interested in. I'm looking forward to see what happens with Meta and the other brands who are competing with Meta to try to make augmented and virtual reality mainstream. I know that's been a struggle for brands over the years, but that's probably the one that I think is coming around the corner. The others, I would have, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have been shocked that privacy is nearly non-existent due to the way technology is used today, where it's mainstream to share your most personal moments with the public. 10 years ago, I would say I was surprised that was going to be a thing or as mainstream of a thing. But today we share so much of our private lives online, where they're going live stream with our daily events or just taking pictures and posting those pictures to the public. I'm not going to be surprised if everyone has a 24-hour live channel broadcasting their life at some point I don't know when that's going to happen,
Mm.
but there's already elements of people broadcasting their 24-hour life on YouTube or other social channels, and that's probably the next step that I think is going to happen.
Yeah, that would be interesting because then there might be some interesting interactions in that space too. Because if you're doing your live stream and then your spouse or your kids are doing live streams at the same time, how does all of that work into the house structure and all along those lines? So, but I guess if you got individual designations of where they're being targeted, maybe you're just doing different target markets. So maybe the kids are targeting their school mates and you and your wife are targeting your family, friends, and all along those lines. But that would be an interesting conversation as to how that happens and how that goes about happening. But I could definitely see that happening. But the other thing that you just mentioned that has been a concern of mine and it has been there for a while is I know that I do a lot of collection of information of business cards and other things. And for the last, I'd say probably almost a couple of years, I've been trying to put those in databases. And as I've told friends of mine, and when I mentioned this to them, they were startled. But I was startled the first time. It happened to me as well. Is I literally put in the name of the person, maybe the business or whatever the basic information of the business card was, and because of the way technology is designed, when it populated in a picture. Sometimes it even populated in their address and some other information that was not on the card that I was actually putting the information in. So it does seem like it is very much out there, the information that we have that we are making public that we maybe don't intend to be public. Because like I said, I know one of the business cards, I think it might have only been their number and maybe their business address. And by the time I just typed that information in and hit enter to create the card, it was like almost a full database of of who they were and all in that space. I'm going like, that's not what I was intending. I just wanted the information and everything. But it does seem like it's very invasive in that way and everything. I think I used the right word, but I just wanted your take on that because that was the first time it happened was years ago, but it did kind of shock me.
No, it's essentially you said it's somewhat invasive that way. The funny part is today we voluntarily give our personal information to companies.
Mm.
They present us with terms and agreements indicating what they're going to do with the data that we're uploading, and it's in our minds for the average consumer. We think that it's private, it's mine, but
Right.
if it's a free service, or even in cases of paid service, you're voluntarily sharing the data, and they're going to use it in some capacity. Um, I, One thing I think is interesting is that as we're making things look more digital
Mhm.
and less tangible,
Right.
the tangible elements are there's a very short period of time, but the tangible elements have more value to individuals than the digital. So, for instance, I was speaking about my marketing plan. Part of my marketing plan is that if you open one of my emails that we send to you, if you click on something, I send you a letter.
Right.
So I send you a letter, and I often get notified by prospects and clients that, hey, I got your letter. How did you get my address?
Mm-hmm.
And they're always shocked that I had either their business address, which they didn't make public, or their personal address, which they didn't know was attached to their business
Right.
publicly, right? And I tell them, well, it's in a database. I get contact information from a data aggregator that has contact information, and they scrape all the databases. When you register your business, even though your personal address may not be made public on that website which you registered your business, in a lot of cases, if your public address is on that document, they may, depending on the jurisdiction, state, they may have to make it publicly available that you are the owner of that business, and it may include your personal address. So there's
Yeah.
ways where your data is publicly visible, though you may not be able to Google it. And
Right.
I found that very interesting that clients, that prospects, we don't always know that we're making our data public, even when because we have a mental perception that, oh, it's, it's not going to be public.
Yeah.
Um, but often some way, we're often voluntarily giving it away for free.
No, definitely we're doing that. And the other thing you mentioned, augmented reality, and I do have some friends that are in that space as well. But I know that sometimes people are also concerned that maybe we're losing touch with the human element, because I do know some folks that even in the dating and personal lanes feel that they are more comfortable being away from their day-to-day companies than they would be being with their blood and skin people and all along those lines. So I just wonder, is that ever a fear in your own mind about the popularity of augmented reality and some of the technologies that maybe we will lose a little bit of our human connectivity?
Actually, I think I mentioned earlier, I took a break from social profiles for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at the end of that break. I'm actually getting back onto to social profiles. But what I realize is that it is the new human experience, being integrated with the technology, connecting with other individuals through the technology. I would never have this conversation with you, or unlikely for us to have this conversation if it wasn't for the technology. I
Right.
don't. I just think it's the new experience, and while a few of us may not like it, it's almost a requirement for us to be involved in it in order to interact with others. Because without it, you're going to miss out on a human experience that you could have, that you can't have without the technology.
Yeah,
So
that makes a
that,
lot of
and
sense. How
so
much of
another
the
element,
um, mhm.
I was going to say another instance that you might find interesting is that there's actually no way to not be a part of it at this point. And if you've been on any social platform, or if you've used technology and given your contact information in any way, I don't think anyone's deleting that information. Like, for instance, right now we have laws, GDPR, the California Data Protection Act, that imply that if you want a organization to delete your data, that they're going to actually delete your data. I've seen no evidence that they're actually doing so. About a year ago, when I decided that I want to take a break from social profiles, actually I asked all the profiles to delete my data. I went through all the processes. I contacted their compliance department. I deleted all of my content off the profiles. And then what I found is that they're deleting your content, but they're keeping elements of that data on their profile in their databases, so that once you're ready to jump back in, you don't lose all of it. So while most, or let's say maybe 70% of it, we have ability to say, hey, please delete my content, they're keeping some element of you that's going to stick around probably forever. And I don't really see a good way for us to avoid that going forward, which is why I say that it's just part of the new human experience. Mark, did I lose you? Did I lose you? To add to that, I'd also say that I think it's a good exercise for individuals to take breaks from the technology, at least in the short term, because I think for most of us, um, we're not quite sure how integrated we want to be within the technology. So we have to really figure out, how do we parse our day-to-day lives with technology and without technology, so that we can get acclimated to whatever our human experience is going to look like with the technology going forward. I think it's a good exercise to take breaks, 30 days, 2 days, a break from technology, whether it just be a component. Maybe you take a break from the social platform, or you take a break from watching content online for a few days. I think that's a good experience that everyone should partake in from time to time, and then make decisions on which components of the technology you want to keep, and which components of the technology you want to exclude from your day-to-day life.
No, that makes a lot of sense and everything. I was having computer problems, so popped in on the phone while we get the computer to go back in that space because technology has its moments, even on live streams as well, and all in that way. One of the questions I was going to ask you is, and we're going to wrap up very shortly and everything, is how do you go about balancing your regular day-to-day life in your regular work and everything, because you are an entrepreneur, you're in the computer space. You've alluded to the wife. I don't know if y'all have any kids or not, but definitely there's that work-life balance that is very important, and I know it's something that we've been talking about on the network on a number of these shows. But how do you deal with the work-life balance? Sounds like your wife is trying to collect money off of your insurance, but that's just my take based on a couple of your answers and everything.
Yeah, yeah. So scheduling in, times for myself is actually critical. So scheduling times to go to the gym or workout, that's critical. Scheduling in times to partake in recreational activities. I don't like to watch sports, but I love playing. So I'd say at the moment I probably golf one at least once or twice a month. If I can get opportunity to play basketball or some other sport, I'll make sure I do that as well. My weekends, I typically try to dedicate my weekends to family. So my wife has complete control over what I do on the weekends, and I dedicate a lot of time on the weekends to family. So I think that's the way I try to balance it. But I can definitely tell you, the lines are blurred. So my work life and my personal life, they intertwine. I'll take a business call on a weekend. I'll take a business call after, after normal business hours. I just have process in place where I try to schedule in those things that make life worth living outside of the day to day job.
That makes a lot of sense. How much of a fan of computers is your wife and everything? Because I do know there's been conversations about folks that are in like-minded fields and like-minded businesses being great together, but then folks that sometimes need to be in a totally separate field. And you were definitely been in that computer technology lane for a while. So I was wondering, is she also in the computer technology lane, or is she going like, no, I got to do something other than computers?
Well, I mean, she uses computers for for her day to day employment, but she's not as active as what I would think the average consumer is active. Like she's not a big fan of the social media platforms. She's not as active in that as maybe she was years ago. There may be some influence from me from that because I'm no longer a big fan of the social platforms. Um, but she uses them. I can tell you that there was a big argument in my home about the voice assistants like Amazon Alexa and the Google Assistant because they're all over my house, but they're definitely not in my bedroom, and they're definitely not in our master bathroom, in our master bedroom. There's a big fight in my home about how we can use voice assistants and the digital assistants, home assistants in our house, and I'd say we both won. There's parts of the house where I can put them in, and parts of the house I can't. But I can definitely say that they probably control some component of the home um, in some way. So we use them, and then we mitigate how much we use them so that there's a balance between both of our comfort levels. Her being not as techie, and me being a hardcore techie.
Gotcha. So, are there any children or relatives in the field, and are you encouraging them to go into the tech field? And what advice would you give to folks that are thinking that they want to go into the technology field in general?
Yes, so there are actually two of my family members. They're actually my two mentors. The one I referred to earlier is the one who encouraged me to get into tech when I was 19. Is my aunt, and she's been in tech since well over 25 years that I can think of. I've been in tech for over 20 years, so she's been in it longer than that. I still consider her a mentor, and the family member, my mentor in databases when I chose databases as a specialty that I got into in my 20s. That was actually a cousin, an older cousin of mine, and I still consider him a mentor in many ways, though both of them reach out to me now and ask me questions about what I'm doing. We call each other to see what one another are doing. So I definitely have family members who are involved in tech. Um, I always encourage my younger family members to consider it. I don't think there's any good way to avoid it from a career standpoint. You have to be involved, and I'm trying to make sure that all the young people that I interact with are really investing some time in identifying a specialty that's aligned with their personal goals, a tech specialty that can be aligned with their personal goals. Because depending on the profession, even if it's arts, there's probably going to be some type of technical component that's going to be required in the next 5 to 10 years that could um, automate some portions of a field. And it's my opinion that if you're not at the forefront of how you can utilize it, that you'll be left behind or have a very difficult time catching up. So I'm actively encouraging all young people, especially the ones in my circle, to get involved in tech in some way.
That makes a lot of sense. We're seeing a lot of conversations around STEAM or STEM or whatever the other acronyms that they want to give it and everything. But do you think that there has been enough conversation around coding, and are our school systems doing a good enough job in terms of encouraging the development of understanding of the computer field in your mind and your own knowledge based on what you have seen? Would you like to see more of these kind of programs? Because I've seen some that are done both in the school system and some that are done by tech folks that are outside of the school system and have created their programs, whether that's through a community center or through their businesses or a number of other ways. But how are you thinking that we as a society are doing in terms of encouraging folks to get involved in the STEAM fields?
Yeah, so I think people are doing a lot of amazing work in the STEAM fields, the STEM or STEAM fields. I think the challenge that they're impacted with is what's being marketed to young people. Mm. And I don't know any university that doesn't have education in all areas of STEAM. Most of the high schools and undergraduate elementary schools have some element of mathematics and technology and arts. So I think there's a lot of work, and I'm always impressed by the people doing it outside of formal education. But I think what's been advertised to young people, that's where what we're really fighting against. Because I think what the universities and employers are advertising to people isn't necessarily that that you need to get into these fields, especially the more technical side of the STEAM component, to have gainful employment or gainful financial outcomes later in life. You need to do the technical side or get some specialty there. I think that's not being as well advertised to the young people. I think what is being advertised are the arts and the entertainments. Music is big. There's a lot of business around music, a lot of business around sports, entertainment. So I think that's really what's being advertised to young people. And I think that's what educators and individuals that are doing it outside of education are fighting against. They're trying to help young people choose that profession over another.
Yeah. Do you think the government is doing enough to support technology? Because I know that there have definitely been some politicians on both sides of the aisle that have come up with programs to fund some of the things that are going on in technology. And we know that a lot of people are paying attention to various infrastructure kind of bills that have to do with technology. But are you seeing enough support from the political landscape, whether it's there in the Illinois area or whether it's in the national level, in support of technology as a something that is vital to our society?
Yeah, so that's again, I'm not a politician, so I'm gonna say what I'm thinking. So let's go ahead and say what I'm thinking. I'd say the politicians, in my opinion, are not encouraging what they do not already have their pulse on. Their pulse on. So if once they figure out a path which they can personally market or gain financially from the technology, then they're supporting it. And I think that's what the politicians are doing. On the other side, the US government, like the Department of Defense, is the number one financier of tech. So they, government, U.S. government is financing tech. What they could be doing better is giving government contracts for tech efforts to small and minority-owned businesses. Now they do have processes in place, and they do put out RFPs for small and minority-owned business, but they also have components that can circumvent that. Like they have the freedom to specifically choose a vendor that's well established and already a big name, so they can circumvent allowing a small vendor being selected to get a government contract. So while they're spending a lot of money, they could be doing a better job selecting those smaller players in the market to give new opportunities within the tech space.
No, no doubt about that and everything. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I know it took us a minute to get it all going and everything. One thing I get all of my guests to do is definitely show where you can be contacted at. You definitely give some great insights. So I think our audience will thoroughly enjoy your insights, and I hope that you'll make a return trip. We might even have to get you to do a tech show on the network, because we're always looking for other and newer shows as well. So we might have to get you to do an entire tech show that would be you talking about the tech industry and all in that kind of space, because I'm somewhat of the de facto program director. So I can definitely make those offers whenever I see folks that are in that kind of expert lane and all in that kind of way. But they definitely, if you want to share how folks can reach you social media wise, how they can be in contact with your business, and if you want to share more about what the business exactly is. And then the last question that I get just about all my guests on just about all my shows to do is, it is a global network. We have listeners in Australia, Malaysia, definitely England, a number of other places, and of course throughout the United States and all in that way. So I am always about encouraging, with all we've been going through, whether it was the pandemic, whether it was the war in the Ukraine, whether it's a number of other things that have impacted us, that trying to encourage people to have a message of peace and hope and all in that way. So that's something I try to get all my guests to give a message of positivity, is what I call it, is a message of positivity and hope that they want to share with our global community. So if you can tell folks how they can reach you, and any message of positivity that you want to share, if there's any other things that you want to share about yourself and your company. But definitely, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you have enjoyed it as well.
So there's two ways to find me right now. You can find me specifically at wylieblanchard.com. That's Wylie Blanchard, WYLIEBLANCHARD.com. You can find my company, Reintivity, at reintivity.com. That's REINTIVITY.com. Those are the two places to find me and my business. For the listening audience and the watching audience, my advice is to stay positive through the political turmoil that we are experiencing throughout the world and in the nation. They're temporary. Factions will grow and factions will fall. And the only thing that's going to be left after a faction fall is the people. And the people will always take care of the people. So as you're going through your challenges, or as you're succeeding more than the person next to you, make sure you're taking care of the people in your circle, because they're the ones who are going to lift you up during those turbulent times. Mark, thank you very much for having me on the show. I'd love to come back for a second session.
Yeah, definitely have to have you come back for a second session. I said that was the last question, but I do have to tease you, because I know that growing up, most people, when they think of the name Wylie, they automatically think of the cartoon character. So I was wondering if you got a lot of teasing about that as a child, because most people think about Wile E. Coyote, and the fact that Wile E. Coyote was not exactly a fan of technology, even though he did keep trying to blow up that rabbit and everything. But I just wondered if you got a lot of pushback as a kid around the name.
So Wile E. Coyote was a technologist. He every episode he had a new form of tech, whether it be rockets or jet boots or something. He was a technologist. So I did get a lot of slack with that name, and I got used to it. I had to get, and in fact, I got used to it to a point where I use it to help people properly pronounce my name. So I often use it, say it's Wylie Blanchard, like Wile E. Coyote, and they're pronounced pretty much the same. And that helps people, helps simplify how people pronounce my name. Yeah.
Well, I definitely appreciate it. And like I said, I definitely hope to have you back on both this show as well as some other shows as well. I might even reach out to my friend Dr. Kelly and see if we can get you to come and share some of your wisdom with the Black Business Expo as well. So definitely looking forward to different conversations and look forward to having you appear on some other shows that exist also.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a
No
great one.
problem. We're going to get out of here with a couple of PSAs, but this is a special evening edition, weekend edition of the online dinner party. But I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation with Wylie. And who knows, he might appear at a dinner party either next week or later on in the month as well with multiple guests, because we do love having folks come back and share their wisdom. And this is our first chance at meeting Mr. Blanchard, Master Wylie Blanchard. But right now, we're going to get out of here with a couple of PSAs. We've got another show coming on, speaking of Black business, about Black business news that'll be coming our way at 8 o'clock Eastern time. And I think they've got some special guests also, but we're going to check that out later on this evening on podtv.tv. But right now, let's check out this particular PSAs and advertisement and get on out of here.
Are you looking for money-saving strategies for your business and personal finances? Are you tired of working hard every day with little or nothing to show for it? Contact Prosperity Financial Services, LLC right now for your free financial consultation. Call now to reserve yours today, 804-349-8600, 804-349-8600.
How you holding up? Nothing wrong with getting help.
If I promise to look into it, will you drop it and help me build this fence?
Now you need my help.
If you or a veteran you know needs support, don't wait. Reach out. Find resources at va.gov/reach.
My character, Shazam, knows all about growing up in a family full of teenage superheroes. They're bold.
Where's everyone going?
To fight crime?
Okay.
Adventurous. Shazam! There's never a dull moment. And no matter what happens, they'll always have your back. All they need is a place to grow and be themselves. And the best part is, you don't have to be a superhero to adopt a teen. Learn more about adopting a teen from foster care. Visit adoptuskids.org. You can't imagine the reward.